stars be with you.
All right, all right, all right. I am so happy to welcome back to the Energetic Principles podcast. We have Catherine Urban with us here today to talk all about Cancer Solstice season 2023. Thanks for joining me again, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Mel. Happy to be back.
Yeah, Catherine's been on the podcast one or two times. Two times?
I think
Two
twice.
times. I feel
Yeah, I
two
think
times.
twice. Yeah.
She is a
Yeah.
tour de force with forecasting. That's why I like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time I was here, it was also a cardinal season. It was Aries, the Aries ingress on
Yeah.
22.
Big
So,
episode. Yeah.
yeah.
So, well, I know, and you have some Aries placements. I know you have some Cancer placements.
I got all the cardinal placements.
Yeah. So
So,
that's clearly why Catherine has been invited to talk all things cardinal here today. But before we get started, because we do have a lot to talk about, it is a juicy season, especially at the end of it. For those who have not heard Catherine before, share a little bit about yourself with the listeners.
yeah, so I've got like an eclectic astrological background. I would consider myself a pretty nerdy astrologer. I have not stopped learning, it seems like, for 15 years now. I've been in the intense study phase for 15 years, it seems like. And there's just always more to learn with astrology. Like, never think you know everything with astrology. So yeah, my practice is largely a consulting practice, but I also am a horary astrologer. I also do electional, and I teach astrology, and I do forecasting. So you can find me on YouTube, on Instagram. I'm a lot of places.
A lot of places telling you about all the things. And I think you have to be an eternal, well, when you sign up for astrology, which none of us actually do, it just happens to us. I'm noticing, we're all eternal students at it. I think that's what makes it so much fun, is like, you can, even if you've learned it before, you can come back like 10 years later, relearn it, and you're going to be looking at it from a different lens. And if anything, I think that's what makes, a good astrologer, because that's a lot of times that's what's missing in, school systems of just teachers, because essentially astrologers, we're forecasting the stuff, but a lot of us teach. And we're disseminating some sort of information. So to keep it fresh and to keep your mind, engaged and curious is such a valuable asset to the practice, and to life in general, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we have so much to talk about with Cancer Solstice season. We are recording, just FYI, days before a new moon in Gemini squaring Neptune, which is going to have a flavor over this Cancer season, of course, with our lunar cycle. And Catherine and I are actually recording under a Taurus moon that is sextile Neptune, so we are definitely getting to that Neptune vibe here. But yeah, let's get in there. We have so much to talk about. And I mean, number one is, like, when we get to Cancer season, it's the solstice. Summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere, of course, in the winter, which always baffles me over in the southern hemisphere. But Catherine, what are some quick blurbs or just insights into just solstice in general in your mind, especially the summer solstice?
Yeah, so the summer solstice represents the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere and the shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere. So yeah, that presence of light, how we have like the longest day, is largely one of the things that marks the energy of Cancer. And Cancer being a sign associated with life giving, being a water sign associated with the womb and the beginning of life. We see Cancer on the ascendant of the Thema Mundi, and what better for a sign to be on the ascendant of the Thema Mundi than a sign associated with creation. So that's really what Cancer has a lot to say about. And yeah, the moon has its rulership here, and the sun experiences its longest day of the year in the north. So there's a lot of luminary energy here and light giving, life giving. So that's one of the things that we can visually observe. So even if you're not an astrologer, chances are you're familiar with the summer solstice.
Yeah. And I mean, well, it's always interesting to me who likes what seasons, right? You know, a lot of times it just depends on when you were born. But being a summer baby myself, you know, when summer rolls around, you know, there's just this burst of life, you know, life force with the heat of the sun and the elongated, you know, days, and just feeling like, I don't know, just I love the pointing out of the luminary connection, right? Because I mean, when we think about Cancer and Leo season back to back, we've got Moon and Sun territory, and there really is just this strong life-giving force that is the bloom of summer, right? And I always get really excited about it, you know. So I'm thrilled. It could be like I'm a Cancer, you know. I'm born during this time, so it's always
There
like
you
birthdays
go.
around birthdays around the corner. Although the older you get, you know what? Not as exciting, but not as exciting. But I'll be getting out of eighth house perfection year this year, so that is exciting.
That
I'm
is
ready to.
exciting. And
Yes.
and beyond birthdays, you know, Cancer season is just like a time for gathering. Like I feel like the
Mm.
energy of Cancer is just very much about who's on your inside circle. You know, Cancer is represented by the crab. It has that tough outer shell. That shell acts as a protective mechanism. But once you get on the inside of Cancer's embrace, it's nice and squishy in there. There's lots of love to be shared if you are inside of Cancer's circle. So I always think of Cancer season as like summer, active, but you may be drawn to gather with people who feel like home to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very any water sign is very connective. That's the whole you know, that's the whole vibe of water. We want to merge, we want to connect, we want to care, we want to love, we want to, you know, create good times together and have tasty food. You know, I think about all this energy that's going to run together when with between Cancer and Taurus this year. You know, this is a very these are signs that like comfort, like a good time, like tasty things, like to maybe just sit out and bask in the sun and at by the pool, you know, get your water signs in there.
Yeah.
So
There's your water.
there's
Yeah.
your water. And the thing with Cancer too is that you know, we always think about it as a sign that talks about self-nurturance. You know, and there is that once again kind of playing into the luminary theme, because we got a lot of energy going on in Leo this season too. Obviously, we're going to be talking about a special Venus who is going to be doing some things on the
Hint,
last day
hint.
of Cancer season here.
Yeah.
But you know, there is this connection with Cancer being self-nurturance and Leo being self-love, and in order to have that sort of segue of the two, I feel like the nurturance part has to come first to really connect with the love component.
Mhm.
And so, you know, sometimes it's about coming home to yourself or being at home in your own skin and what you need at this point in your life, whatever that looks like for everyone
Oh
listening.
yeah. You can't draw from an empty well. Cannot.
I've tried.
Me too. Doesn't work. So yeah, Cancer season. I hope everyone out there who's listening is doing activities that feel like you're giving back to yourself, that you're watering yourself in a way. I have one more little Cancerian anecdote. You think about the crab being like a sidestepping creature, but it's a
Yeah.
cardinal sign. So I'm teaching my daughter how to water in the garden, and she wants to take the hose and spray it, the little tiny plant dead on. And I'm like, no, you gotta go at an angle. You gotta kind of like tilt the water up in the air so it kind of rains down. And so I just think about that Cancerian nurturing energy as like coming in it from the side or just doing something in like a non kind of like direct way.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, that's
um,
funny. I can just imagine her out there with the hose, just like this poor little seedling just getting doused.
oh yeah, getting pelted. Yeah. So
You
Cancer
wanted water,
energies, yeah,
right?
yeah. So Cancer energy is supposed to be a little gentler. um,
Yeah.
and I think for the most part of the season, it's a little gentler until the end. What do you think, Mel?
Yeah, the end when I was putting together the notes for our forecast here, like it's always kind of this play by play action, and then I started to, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's gonna happen. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's gonna happen. And then I get to the end of Cancer season, and I was like, oh Jesus, that's quite the lineup, right? When you start to see it just all on the paper. So there, I feel like there's a big build that is happening in Cancer season that might start off a little fuzzy and interesting, just because the kind of the lunar overview for this season is we are coming off that late degree Gemini new moon that's square Neptune, which has been a hot spot part of the zodiac for quite some time. So the Mars retrograde, Mercury the year before that, Venus the year before that. So it's almost like it's interesting how the sun's coming around and doing this new moon to sort of wrap up, almost 3 years of transits that have traversed over that particular area of the zodiac. But, anything with Neptune, like, especially these mutable energies and this transitionary and what's real, what are the facts, what are the fantasies, what are the dreams, how do we get the information to push those forward. And it's a strong, interesting transition mixed with dreamy energy and also dissolution to some extent, because when we go into this Cancer season, we're going to have that full moon in Capricorn first, and then we're going to wrap up with a new moon in Cancer. But we have all cardinal quarters. So when you have cardinal quarters, life be moving, right? Cardinal is all about the pivot and the action, and the start and the beginning. So to think about all that kind of leading up to that hot spot end of the season is, it feels a little hold on to your hats. It might be a slow start, but
Oh yeah. Brace yourselves. Stay with us till the end.
Yeah, stay with us to the end. And we have decided not to meander too much today so that we can spend some time on the end, because there is a lot going on. And I would just say as a caveat, I am sick today. I don't know how it happened. Maybe it's the Neptune vibes, but I am pulling it together. I'm pulling it together, people. So if I'm a little here or there or all over the place, bear with me.
We'll be sending you the feel good vibes.
Thank you. So let's talk about some of the other things that are happening here. With Mercury this season, we're gonna have Mercury is on a mission, right? We're in that fast stage.
Oh yeah.
Mercury is just cruising. We start off with Mercury in Gemini, and then we're going to have a superior cazimi in Cancer, and then we'll move on to Leo, all in one season. And Mars is hanging out in Leo, but we'll move to Virgo, and dun dun dun, getting closer to the opposition with Saturn, which we will be talking about here. But of course, and Neptune's going to be stationing retrograde. We have a planet station retrograde. That's big news. But two main things I think that are happening during this season is another planet stationing retrograde, and that is Venus in Leo, which is big news. But also we have the nodes officially switching into Aries and Libra. So any thoughts on any one of those moves in your mind of like something that might be significant for energy?
Definitely. So I think that the nodal shift is important, because, well, one, we've already had one eclipse in Aries. So that can sometimes happen where the nodes haven't yet shifted signs, but the lunation occurs close enough to that node where you can get an eclipse in a sign different from where the nodes are. So we've already had our first Aries eclipse. And so yeah, in my many years of observing planets and their shifts and how they feel, the nodal shift, I really don't feel that until like the next set of eclipses. So you may not feel that shift, but you may start to see some of the themes, the new themes of the Aries Libra kind of showing up in the collective. I've already started to see it a little bit. I think that there's going to be a distinctive emphasis on relationships. I saw this like really eye-catching article, I think it was in Psychology Today, about how we've as a culture started to take boundaries too seriously. And it's been important to learn about boundaries and all that, but many people are just like getting cut off with no explanation, and it hurts. So I think some of this balancing along the Aries Libra axis is going to sort of bring back some of those negotiating skills, relationship tips, how to sort of be an individual and harmonize with other people. Like I think that nodal signature is basically our collective refresher on that topic. And I think we're all still maybe a little socially awkward post-pandemic. And I think that this will be like the perfect energy for us to sort of rebalance those scales, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's the interesting thing about these back-to-back nodal transits, moving from Scorpio and Taurus to Aries and Libra, as these are the four signs that are Venus Mars signs.
Mars, yeah.
Venus Mars, all Venus and Mars. And so we've had all this north node push into the Venus area and the Taurus and that south node in the Mars, but now we're going to have the switch. And I like what you're bringing up about just the negotiating factor and also the stimulation of being out there, right? Because that's kind of the Aries Libra axis, is that partnership and that being able to negotiate our sense of self with the union and find hopefully balances that work for both parties in ideal settings. But these are also, fire and air signs. So these are quicker. These are outward. This is not like still the internalized energy and fixed internalized energy of Taurus and Scorpio. So totally. I think you're absolutely right about sort of that opening of life even further after this weird, weird 3 years that we have been in.
Totally. I love that point that you bring up about things kind of picking up, because as we were chatting before we started recording, there's been sort of like this palpable slowing down. Like a lot of people have been outspoken about that, sort of pulling away, being embodied, being in the moment, sort of slowing things down. And I think we've got that from such a big emphasis on the fixed signs of just moving a little slower. But yeah, that north node moving into Aries, it's gonna kick things up.
High gear. And that's the thing, is like, we don't necessarily, like you said, we might, nodes shift. They're, they need to be activated in some way, especially by eclipses. That's when we feel it the most. But I have a feeling, the unique thing about this shift is going to be that Pluto just moved back into Capricorn only days prior to us recording this podcast. And so that's another thing at the end of this month, is that Pluto is basically going to be square the nodes.
We'll feel that one. So I gotta correct myself on that.
We will feel that. We won't feel it until that. And then we're like, oh, where did this come from? Excuse me.
Yes. We'll feel it right away with that one. Yes.
Yeah. So there is that brewing energy that's going on. And of course, Venus stationing retrograde, she's been in Leo for a little bit now and is getting slower and slower and slower. And, speaking I have Venus ruling my partnership sector. So whenever, Venus is a partnership planet just naturally, but whenever Venus goes retrograde, I'm like, okay, where's this gonna go? Cause I still have like a little bit of, I don't want to say, I use the word trauma loosely in this sentence, but from the Capricorn placement back in, end of
21
and
early
2021, 22. Yeah, so Venus retrogrades are interesting in their, I like them Except when when they get so close to that sun before the rebirth happens, it gets squirrely out there with other people.
Yeah,
Oh
it
my
can.
goodness. What are your takes on just Venus in Leo and retrograding in Leo? The sun
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah. So this one I feel like is going to be, I mean, anytime Venus goes retrograde, it's a time where there does tend to be a little bit more disharmony. I liken Venus retrograde to PMS, where she's a little grouchier and she's a little less willing to let things slide. You know, Venus wants harmony, Venus wants cohesion. Venus is willing to let little things slide without making a big stink out of it because she doesn't like the upset. But if it pokes at her enough, she will say something about it. So Venus retrograde is the chance to say something about the irritation and to have some discourse about that. And I really think that the like the PMSy goddess theme is going to be like very relevant because she's going to station retrograde on the same day as Eris, goddess of discord.
Oh.
And she's going to be right there next to Black Moon Lilith when she stations retrograde. So, yeah, that combined with everything else that we're seeing at the end of Cancer season,
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that there's going to be a little bit of disharmony, and hopefully it's to create harmony. You know, hopefully there's something about a willingness to fight for something. Like I know in previous Venus retrogrades we've seen social unrest. Like in the Venus retrograde in Gemini, we had the George Floyd protests. So yeah, there was the reason for that protest was, you know, obviously to create more equality. So those are things that Venus really cares about. And in Leo, she's passionate. You know, she's fired up about something. And I think, but on a personal level, I think it'll be good. I think there's, you know, 3 squares with Jupiter. There's like an indulgent side, a treat yourself side, but there's also the 3 squares with Uranus. So it's like liberate yourself, break free, be authentically expressed everywhere, like in your own self-expression as well as in your relationship dynamics and in how you distribute your time. So I think Venus retrogrades are a great check-in for how we sort of allocate our time and energy, and also like the quality of our relationships as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, at the end of the day, when we think about Venus and her balancing act, you know, we're just looking for, and what we're always looking for in outside of ourselves and others that some of us realize and some of us don't, is that sense of wholeness within, you know, and so thinking about her being fired up in Leo, right? You know, Leo connecting in with the sun and that sense of self and individuality and authenticity and, you know, sovereignty. And where that passion lies is that passion, is it only like festering within, you know? Is it something that needs to be, you know, I think about like just Leo almost being like Vesta in the sense of that, you know, internal fire that just keeps going. It's a fixed fire, and it's very creative in that aspect and just keeps us in that state of passion and creativity. And if we, you know, just being as a creative person myself, it's like when I slip out of those states, I find, you know, I'm missing a part of myself, for whatever, you know, reason, however it got lost or wherever it got misplaced, or even if the sense of what it is that I want to create, or what it is that I'm attracted to in life, and that passion shifts, you know, and then how to reallocate that to be encompassed back into my fire, so to speak. And so I feel like there's going to be a very personal aspect to this Venus retrograde, especially when she merges with the sun, you know, in its own domicile, right? You know, it's been a hot moment, pun intended, since what is it, 2015? I think 2015 was the last time Venus, and I can think back to my time. Oh, I know exactly what was happening there. It was
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it was a really fun summer, but I just also remember the Marriage Equality Act. And so I think of
Oh.
Venus and Leo as like born this way kind of thing, um, like authentic self-expression. And I don't know, I think it could be a big moment for trans rights, for
Mm.
LGBTQ rights, for, like I think we may see some pushback, especially like with drag. Like drag is
Ah,
so Leo,
right. Are
Venus
they?
and
Hmm,
Leo.
it
So
is.
I don't know, like with Eris has a lot to do with inclusion and social justice. So I think this may be the season of pushback. So
I hope so. I would, I mean, I generally am irked by matters of injustice, but I love me a drag artist. I love drag. And so
oh yeah.
coming for the why? I just don't understand it. I mean, I do understand it. I totally understand it. And that's why it's so frustrating because I see you. I get you. I know what you're doing, people, but it's misplaced and it's just very frustrating. Anyways, I hope what you're saying is true, Catherine, because I would love some pushback, and to not to like, dim the shine. It's like, who is anybody to dim another person's shine,
Yeah, totally.
and for reasons that have nothing to do. Whenever they say it's about the kids, it's never about the kids. It's never about the
It's
kids.
just the propaganda
It's the
cover
propaganda.
letter. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it is going to be quite a summer with this Venus retrograde. I know that when in 2015, that's actually when we got. I shared with Catherine earlier that I just went through a progressed new moon, which is big news, in the progressed chart. When you go through a new moon, whew, it's a long time coming. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah.
But around that time of summer 2015 is actually when I had my progressed last quarter moon. And it coincided with that Venus retrograde happening in Leo, which for me is my 10th house. And it's interesting because this Venus retrograde is going to be only in Leo, where that one I think stationed at 0 degrees of Virgo. So there was like a little flavor of Virgo that went in, of her fall sign actually that went into that. But that was, you think about Venus being a place of the arts, right? And Venus, kind of taking on more of that masculine warrior type of energy when she stations retrograde to then be reborn. That's around the time, actually, right before the cazimi took place. One of my bandmates, the drummer of one of my bands, had a traumatic brain injury.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a big thing. Not to say that Venus retrograde is going to do anything of this to people. He's a Leo. He's a super Leo. He was born at a
Mm.
time that every planet was in Leo. Which is, I mean, like
Oh,
every planet except the
like
moon.
Pluto.
Yeah, well, not Pluto, but
Okay.
all the personal planets, were in Leo. So he's kind of a super Leo. So Venus was retrograding over his stellium of personal planets there. But my point being is that combined with the progressed moon and the Venus retrograde in the 10th house, it repositioned everything that we were doing, right?
Yeah.
Creatively,
Yeah.
because an unexpected thing happened, that created discord, disharmony. Because sometimes this
Mhm.
discord and disharmony is not necessarily like a fight. It could just
Yeah.
be something that's in what was considered flowing in your life, can be dislodged in some way.
That's a great
Um,
point.
and that was difficult, and luckily he is okay. He came out on the other side. It was a miracle, Christmas miracle. But just anyways, but that was my last experience with Venus and Leo. So I'm curious as to see, because it did end up routing me and my creativity for many years to come.
In your
So
10th
we will
house.
have to,
Yeah.
yeah, we will have to see.
Yeah.
So that being said, let me share my screen here. If you're watching the video on YouTube, we're going to start to look through some of these transits so that we can get to the end, even though we can get to the end and talk about this big lead up that's coming. So, all right. So Catherine, you see the screen okay here?
Yeah.
All right. So Cancer season is going to officially touch down on June 21st, 2023 at 7:57 a.m. San Diego. So that will be about 10:57 if you're on the East Coast, and anywhere else you do the math there. But it is an interesting, you see the moon in Leo there. Speaking of, right? The moon's in Leo with Venus and Mars. And yeah, look at that Lilith right there. I didn't even take that into account. My mind swirling. But we sort of have we have an interesting first week of the Cancer season with Mercury and Mars.
Mhm.
Mercury being in Gemini, Mars over here in Leo. And then with Chiron, there's sort of this flow between Mercury, Mars, and Chiron, while the Sun is tapping into the nodes, and just Mercury also squaring Neptune a little bit after that. So it's an interesting way to start Cancer season, I think, mercurially speaking. Any thoughts, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this Mercury Mars sextile. I don't get excited about every sextile in the world, but this one is exciting because they have reception by bound. They're in each other's bound. And so I think that this one could be like a bigger experience of like a Mercury Mars connection in a flowing way. So I think that this could be really supportive for getting stuff done, especially mercurial pursuits. So if you need to clean out your inbox, or if you just need to, if you, I don't know, if you're a writer or if there's anything like that that you have to do, I think that that one would be really fun, really chatty. I think that would be like
Yeah,
a very, that would make for like a good party atmosphere. I think like lots of energy around
absolutely.
conversation. So yeah, I think that that one would be just in general a really great day to get things done and to hang out and chit chat as well. um
This kind of
yeah.
speaks to what you were talking about earlier when we're like talking about summer and starting to round up the troops and getting out there more, and kind of like it's got this bursty sort of energy that is not only able to kind of get things done, but just being very communicative and on display, and the party energy does seem to be very fitting. It's also one of the things with Mercury getting closer to that square with Neptune throughout the week too.
Hmm.
Thinking about, and this is coming from someone who has Mercury in Leo and Mars in Gemini, so the reverse reverse position of this. Sometimes you're just out there, you're talking to people, you're flapping your lips, you can grandstand a little. I'll admit it. And so it's interesting to see these two together, and then kind of running into the either the misconception or the not so sure, or why did I say that, with the Neptune component. So it's almost like, if you're out there, get the season off to a good start. Things are in motion, we're flowing there, but also know, I guess what I'm trying to say is a limit with what it is you say, about whom you say it, how much you're giving away of yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it could be just like kind of hitting a wall. Like you feel really intellectually sharp or just like energetically stimulated in your
Yeah.
mental sphere. And so you just maybe take on a lot or do a lot or socialize a lot. And then you're right. Like by that Saturday, we get that Neptune square to Mercury. And it's like, oh, brain fog. I'm a little brain dead. I need to
Yeah.
retire. I need to just like recover a little bit and kind of just let things flow. Like I think that Mercury, Neptune, certainly in that harsh square aspect, there can be a sense of overwhelm or cloudiness where there can be like that frustration where you wish you had the foresight but you just don't. And so there's an element of surrender that comes with Mercury Neptune. Like if you're tired, you're tired.
Yeah.
If you don't have a solution, you don't have a solution. Sometimes there's like an overly hopefulness about that aspect that can kind of lead us down to some sort of disappointment theme there. So yeah, there's something about rest. I think rest would probably be the antidote there. So just know that you'll have a busy week. and a
Yeah.
chill weekend.
A chill weekend, right? Especially with Sunday when the moon's gonna oppose that Neptune. So yeah, so that's the thing is like there just might be a little bit of ups and downs with that. You know, one minute you're talking it up, you're confident, you got this, and the next minute you're like, do I? You know,
Mhm.
and just move through that because as we know, everything always changes. Um,
One
but
other
yeah,
one
go ahead.
other thing with this aspect is be careful about what you hear.
Yeah,
This can be Mercury and Gemini square Neptune. That can be like a little bit of a rumor factory or just
yeah.
like a headline getting a little too much hype. So just be careful what you hear with that one. And that one can also feel a little bit like a Mercury retrograde where there can sometimes be some tech snafus and whatnot. So just make sure you're saving your documents and we should be good.
Yeah. And definitely get that rest in the weekend because the next week kind of start the next week kind of starts off with the bang because part of this, you know, we see Mars over here in Leo just inching up to this square with Uranus, you know, and that always is a party waiting to pop off there. And it's going to coincide with a Libra first quarter on Monday. So we sort of have this sort of combustible Monday, a very active Monday going on with the lunar cycle pushing off in Libra. Mars square and Uranus, kind of what you were saying earlier, Catherine. That's where my mind goes right away is sort of these almost like these Venus retrograde precursors, leaning on the Mars side of things, because you know Mars and our individual drive and motivation, and you know what we're all doing with our lives here is sort of at this, you know, very volatile and combustible moment. Not in a way, you know, fixed signs. I feel like we've come to see that they're not as, you know, just fireworksy as you know maybe Uranus and Aries was, but that doesn't mean that things don't shift and become yeah, I don't know
It
what I'm
just
saying with
takes
there,
a
but
little longer. It just takes a little
it does.
longer. Yeah. I feel like fixed signs have had to take a celestial beating in order to actually move the energy. Like
100%.
it
As
couldn't
one,
have it,
yeah.
yeah, it couldn't have been any other way.
It's true. I
The
feel like I'm
universe is
still getting
wise.
I'm still getting the beating. I am. Like I'm like it's true. It's like it doesn't matter how much Uranus sits on your fixity. It doesn't matter that Saturn cruised over it. It doesn't matter that Venus and Mars is there. I'm telling you, when you're a fixed person, you got some fixed placements too.
Hmm.
You know, it's like the heels dig in. You're like, oh, I know that needs to change, or I know that this doesn't feel comfortable anymore. But it's like, but
You
what?
you've
You know?
received all the signs and you're still waiting for one more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe we're gonna see some signs at the beginning of this week, right? You know, having obviously, you know, it's probably gonna be busy out there in the world. People are gonna be popping off with their own agendas, you know, especially Mars and Leo. You know, Mars and Leo is very it's very out there. It's very passionate. It's very talking about digging some heels in because you know Uranus can be very you know volatile, but it can also be very rigid and specific. So when we're dealing with others, right, we're gonna have a first quarter moon in Libra. So chances are we're dealing with someone else. We're dealing with the justice system. We're dealing with some sort of fairness or negotiation.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, this is Uranus can definitely push things to extremes. And it definitely, I think, like, especially with Mars, there's a love of shock value.
yeah.
And there can be some unpredictable commotion there. Like, I think of Mars Uranus as like the Molotov cocktail, or um, like when the Jenga tower falls down, or like there's a commotion to it that gets your attention. So there can be maybe intentional attention grabbing acts, or there can be other things that just sort of happen naturally that turn our heads in attention. But yeah, I would think if it's an intentional act, there's definitely like that Mars in Leo passion. And of course, with Uranus and Taurus, we keep seeing the earth say, hey, pay attention to me, climate
Yeah.
change, pay attention to me. So I would be nervous, right now where I live, we're experiencing some mega forest fires across the Great
Mm.
Lakes in Canada. And so I think of all this energy in Leo as a fire sign. I would be worrying about forest fires with that. But yeah, just in general, I think there's just something real fiery saying, hey, look at this, pay attention.
Yeah, and that makes sense thinking about just the quality of the air first quarter, right? And sort of like that on Tuesday it's going to sextile all of that. Actually, maybe even later in that day, it's going to sextile all that Leo. So you think about that fire starting energy there, whether it is like literally speaking or metaphorically speaking.
I like the
There is,
metaphor speaking.
you
Yeah.
know, there can be a little bit of that fire start energy, and we have to keep in mind, Venus is getting slower, and she's essentially squaring Uranus at this time too, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the one thing we have to keep in mind with the Venus Mars cycle, and her dance with Mars, is that they're gonna get awful close, but they're never gonna meet,
It's a
and
denied connection.
they're denied. So
Access denied.
exactly. So when we think about these moments in a first quarter in Libra, and we might be trying to find, this balance or this harmony, or like uh, just connection with others, and where that's going, and tension there between our own self-nurturance and what we need or what the family needs, right? Thinking about that Cancer dynamic with the sun there. Yeah, there's still something about this story where Venus and Mars don't necessarily meet. So keep that in mind as they sort of, Venus sort of mirrors what Mars does and is close enough. And every time they're activated together, it might be a more elongated story that doesn't quite have the resolution that we would be seeking for between the two coming together.
Yeah, like it might look like something's going to go through, the deal's going to close, the relationship is going to happen. And then for some reason, things kind of fizzle, it loses steam. And it may be because Venus is the one that slows down,
Yeah.
let's go of the chase a little bit, that what you desire sort of changes. So it's like if you are thinking about starting like a whole new paint job on your house, you might say, I don't know. And then you wait till after the Venus retrograde. And then you might say, yeah, I'm glad I waited because I like this color scheme better.
Yeah.
So it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So have patience there. And if we are trying to make those decisions, and we are coming together with people, and everybody's like fired up, getting started, look ahead a little, just because it's what you see in this particular moment and the excitement that's there. There's more to come. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, Mercury's just hanging out there at the beginning of the week at the 29 degrees of Gemini, and is about to move into Cancer. So, Mercury ingresses into Cancer, and, flows with the nodes there at the beginning of the week on the 26th and the 27th. The same time we're having all this, first quarter Mars, Venus, Uranus action. But we have this interesting lineup that's going on for the remainder of this week, right? So if you notice on the chart, we basically have Mercury getting very close to the Sun there, getting ready for its superior cazimi. But what's going to happen is both of those planets are going to trine Saturn over there in Pisces on Wednesday and Thursday there. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, basically Wednesday, Thursday, Friday through the end of June here. And then the sun is going to, or Mercury's going to meet up with the sun there in that cazimi, basically trining Saturn, and then they go
Yeah.
right on to sextile Jupiter. So we have this cazimi. Put it all together, Mal. So we basically have this Sun Mercury cazimi that is really highlighting actually the Jupiter Saturn sextile that just happened right before Cancer season started. So, I mean, thoughts on the Saturn component, Jupiter, the cazimi? There's a lot there. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that so a Mercury cazimi in Cancer, that feels like very much like this internal sort of spark, this internal reassurance, this internal clarity with Saturn. A lot of times people are looking for like this big light bulb moment with the cazimi, but a lot of times it's quieter. It's sort of like this quiet internal yes, or idea or affirmation that sort of comes in around that time. And I would think that with Saturn there, you're going to know it. You're going to know what that feeling is, what your body is telling you. Because Mercury in Cancer is a very receptive sign. It's a very receptive sign for Mercury to be in. It's a mute sign. So there's a lot that is felt for Mercury in Cancer. Mercury in Cancer has an album for everything, every emotion, every mood, every situation. Mercury in Cancer has an album for it because it's letting yourself be moved by emotion, letting yourself be moved by an experience, a beautiful experience, a sad experience. And so there's some kind of clarity coming through from Saturn with that. So I think that that is a very potent, a very potent Mercury cazimi there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying about the quality of it being felt, right? You know, this is all in the water signs, and then Jupiter being in Taurus, and we just talked about that early in the program, sort of that those slower, embodied, internalized energies that come with water and earth. And to think about, it's rather intriguing to think about, especially on Wednesday. And Thursday, but especially Wednesday, the moon in Scorpio is going to make a grand water trine, basically with the Mercury, the Sun, Saturn, and then go on to oppose Jupiter. So there's lunar activity that's coming in on Wednesday, mostly a little bit on Thursday. That's going to highlight this. So when you talk about like what Catherine was just saying about it being this felt experience, you know, because if there's one sign, if there's one moon sign, maybe you can speak to this, Catherine. If there's one moon sign that feels the, you know, the intensity of feeling, you know, a Scorpio moon, it's gonna give it to us.
Oh heck yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to ruminate on with a moon in Scorpio. Yeah, and I was just thinking too, because moon in Scorpio sort of represents a held emotion, and Cancer represents nostalgia in the past, that there could be something coming up from the past, like an emotional imprint, a memory that is important, an important piece of this sort of clarity coming through. So yeah, and that is going to be happening at 9 degrees Cancer. So if you have that anywhere in your chart, look for that. But if not to worry, your Cancer house is going to feel it.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting to think about the lead up to it all too, because it's, you know, that moon in Scorpio, it's really the last time the moon's going to make a conjunction to the South Node in Scorpio for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
So there's sort of this, yeah, it's almost like the moon gets into Scorpio, meets the South Node, and might even just set up this chain from, you know, Mercury to the Sun to Saturn to Jupiter. And if you think about all those together, right, you know, like
Yeah.
it paints a very vivid picture of what the internalized process might be. But I love that it ends with that kind of bird's eye view to Jupiter.
Yeah,
And
maybe
yeah,
emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, letting something go and
yeah.
finding that Jupiterian upswing of perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
love it.
So expect that basically from Wednesday, June 28th until July 1st. We sort of have this hot pocket of Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn speaking all together. But you know, that's not the only thing that's happening during this time period. We also have good old Neptune, who we've been talking about here, a little on and off. Neptune is going to station retrograde on June 30th. In the middle
Oh,
of all that, right? You know,
yeah.
Neptune is stationing, which if you're going through a Neptune transit, so if you've had any planets at around, you know, 27 degrees, mutable signs especially, you are going to feel this station. Just FYI.
Gosh, it feels so watery. So just be prepared. Water means feels and tears and just being sensitive with yourself. So get ready.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, but people like, you know, us water signs, we might be a little more acclimated, but you know, when it hits the fire in the air. Like they're like, what is this? Like what is happening right now? So just be on the lookout for that, or just be aware of it. Especially when we have all this personal planet action of Venus and Mars in Leo, which can be a little more, kind of like out there and wanting to like project your best self and being bold and maybe even being a little proud. That's the thing with Leo too, and especially if you're going through sort of this emotional kind of cleansing and aha moment that can come up. It's almost like just thinking about, especially when we're talking about the South Node and the Moon in Scorpio that week, it ruled by that Mars in Leo. I don't know why the word pride just comes up. There might be something with, there might be something with just like.
Well, this is the last day of Pride Month, so yeah.
Oh, well, that's irony right there on the other side.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the last Friday, it's like the last weekend sort of Pride Month. So,
well, and that's interesting too, just thinking about some of the things that you highlighted earlier in the program when we're thinking about all these things that are under attack. And obviously that comes with a lot of deep emotional content that that looks like for the people that are in it, for the people that are outside of it, that are empathetic and look in, like it could be a rather emotional ending to the celebration. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah, definitely something very emotional there with all the water. What I love though is that Neptune is stationing at Venus's exaltation degree.
Oh.
So there's something about a love that conquers, a love that uplifts, a love that goes beyond time and space there. So there's something about infinite love, I think, of the divine, or of your fellow man, or human, with Neptune there stationing at Venus's exaltation degree. So there's something about just like a big love.
Well, and that speaks really well for just what Venus is doing at the same time, right? Because on the 29th of June through July 2nd, she is trining Chiron and then squaring Uranus. So when we think about that big love and that different love and that, big love that comes with compassion that might have been wounded for being who you are, in some respect. When we think about Leo and Aries together there. It's an interesting combo for sure. That can, so.
It's like we have like the big expressive drama of Mars and Venus and Leo in a square to Uranus. So it's like drag as protest, or I've been hearing about bimbo core as protest, which is basically being hyper feminine as like a cis female, but in a way that intimidates men, or just like really hyping up your femininity. One of my colleagues told me about that. I hadn't heard about it till recently, but like being who you are and like owning your self-expression, your sexuality, like as a protest, and I think like Neptune is also about like unity and coming together and like ecstatic upliftment. And so hopefully there's something to be celebrated and bring people together that is like a celebration. But this can also just be like what you said, like the heartfelt moments as well. So
well, and there's one thing that we got to remember about Neptune too, that it's connected with the spectacle. And when we think about the kind of the big energy of Venus squaring Uranus and some of the more dramatic placements that we're seeing here, prepare to see a spectacle of whether it's at a particular parade or someone flaunting off their embodiment, right? We talked about that earlier with Taurus energy, and here there is that Uranus and Taurus and this like embodying your flair, even with things like sporting events. Like chances are, I bet there's going to be some big sporting event that's probably going to happen this weekend on June 30th or June 31st, especially with like MMA and boxing. always connected with a big Neptune transit. It's just for
Hmm,
whatever reason, because it's the spectacle, right? It's the show.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is when basketball goes into finals. Oh wait, no,
Oh,
never mind. They just won. Never mind. I
oh
was
no,
thinking
they're.
June. I'm not like a big sports person, but yeah, I think that the Nuggets just won. So never mind.
So, but I mean, all this that we're talking about, right? We've got a big lead up, and especially with Venus squaring Uranus and trining Chiron, right? She's going to retrograde. So, this is the first pass of three. So, keep that in
Yeah.
mind that whatever's happening around June 30th, 29th, 30th, well, 29th through the 2nd, there could be precursor of energy that is revisited throughout the summer.
Yeah.
But it's getting hot in here, right? We got a waxing Sagittarius moon that is leading us to a Capricorn full moon. So let's move on over to our full moon here. Because that's basically everything that we're talking about here is essentially leading up to a Capricorn full moon,
Mhm.
which is I'm trying to piece together like how that looks within some of the more fiery component and the Neptune and the because Capricorn, speaking as a Capricorn moon, there's sort of this just all like business component, all business, whether that's actual business or just sort of a facade of pulling it together, being strong through something, right? Especially if we just went through a really watery period. I feel like this Capricorn full moon kind of takes us back into the strength or the perceived strength that needs to lie there with Capricorn. But that's just kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. I
What
think
do you
it
think, Catherine?
I think it definitely has like a sobering quality to it where it's just like it kind of soaks up some of the wetness of Cancer season, where we're coming out of this really watery kind of week. And Cancer and the Capricorn full moon is kind of like, all right, let's stop crying for a minute. It's like after the tears, after the emotions flow, your left brain is able to step in and like get logical again and help, like, are we going to pick the pieces back up? How are we going to respond? So I think that this Capricorn full moon helps us to get back into like an objective mindset and helps us kind of take care of business. So it's going to soak up some of those puddles in our lives, I think.
Soaking up the puddles. Yeah, because it is configured to Saturn, the ruler of that moon, and that's the thing with the moon being in Capricorn too. It is a place of its detriment. So especially if
Mhm.
we being in Cancer season and all, and we've been talking about all this watery quality and this emotional quality, part of the detriment expression is the exile or the stepping back from said emotion or sensitivity or yeah, just being immersed in this more emotional space when chances are we have a life to lead and we have day-to-day this is a Monday that this is happening. Basically, it's almost like after all that with the work, it's like Monday, it's like, okay, well, back to work, people, get to business. You got things to do, places to go, people to see, the
Well,
world doesn't
unless
stop.
well, unless it's 4th of July weekend where you are. It's
Oh,
otherwise
true.
it's kind of like a serious 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's like, okay,
Ooh.
people have been like Neptuning it up
Oh man.
over the weekend. And so this is, after the hangover wears off, you have this Capricorn moon that says, all right, let's get the yard work done. And then it's kind of like let's get back to business a little bit. But yeah, it tends to be a little bit more of a serious full moon, but the very upside of a Capricorn full moon is like thinking about the future. I think that that's such um a valuable component of it is just like, okay, well, we're planning, we're thinking ahead. And so yeah, that is what it will be good for.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that because the basically the degree of this full moon being at 11 degrees of Capricorn is essentially tapping into that Sun Mercury cazimi that we just experienced. It's flowing with that Saturn. It's got a trine with that Jupiter.
Jupiter.
So there is sort of this. and keep in mind we have it's a cardinal. It's cardinal. It's pushing forward. It's moving on. It's pivoting in some way. There's action being taken. Whether that is, once again, back into the internalized energy of it all, right? Because we are talking about water and earth still, so it might be just that inner momentum that takes place, and on more like a grand scale, but it will probably be out there doing things, preparing for the parties, or well, if you're here in the United States. If you're not in the United States, then you probably could care less about 4th of July.
Yeah.
But so if you're out there somewhere else, chances are your Monday is going to be a TCB sort of day. But
Yeah.
um,
But yeah, I
yeah,
like the optimism there with the trine to Jupiter and the reception with Saturn there and Saturn ruling the moon. It's like we're pushing forward, but we're hopeful about it. It's like a cautious optimism, I think.
cautious optimism. That's very Capricorn moon trine Jupiter. Absolutely, absolutely. So, well, and let's see here, because what kind of happens this whole week is that Mercury's story is not really over yet.
Oh no.
Mercury is just, well, in pure Mercury style, it's just all over the place.
Talking to everybody.
Got so much to do. It's got so much to do. So, and that's the thing we got to think about too. Is like Mercury makes its cazimi, a handful of days earlier, but after that cazimi, it is just sitting in combust town basically, and it's sort of under the beam. So
Mhm.
Mercury is not as, I mean, it's doing some things, but keep in mind that it's still blinded by the sun, especially during this full moon too.
He's
Um,
toasty.
he's a little toasty.
He's a little frizzle fried.
Yeah, yeah. So that being said, with this frizzle that's happening basically on July 4th. It's interesting, on July 4th itself, we start the day, especially on the East Coast, because people will be more up around 7 something in the morning maybe. But that whole morning we're gonna have that moon conjunction to Pluto,
Oh,
in who's
fun.
now back in Capricorn, which is interesting. When we think about just America in general here, and having left a couple years of the Pluto return and what's been going on in the country, and here you have this patriotic day of the July 4th, and it's really tapping into
Yeah.
this
It's a
Plutonian energy.
it's a real Pluto return flavored birthday.
It is. I wonder when does the, just pure curiosity. Okay, so it's not. Oh, okay. So that's just more of like the early morning, mid afternoon. So it won't be the festivities and the fireworks and all that will take place when the moon moves into Aquarius, so it might be a little Pluto-y in the earlier part of the day, but it kind of gives way to more that Aquarius, fun loving, out there amongst the people vibe. So that's
Yes.
nice.
Cool.
So, all right, let's think about our Mercury. We kind of preface that Mercury's on to some moves here. And so, Mercury is basically going to square Chiron, sextile Uranus, and then trine Neptune, all from the 5th of July to the 9th of July, which just occurred to me. That's my birthday, so I'll have a Mercury Neptune trine in my solar return, which I have natally. So that'll be interesting to see how, maybe
Yeah.
some nice little creative boost there.
Be
Um,
lovely.
but yeah, Mercury is doing some things. So that's an interesting lineup if you think about it. A square to Chiron, which can always get a little crunchy. Um, Sextile Uranus feels like it releases that a little bit, with a little, kind of unpredictable component. And then the trine to Neptune sort of just, once again, brings that sort of Mercury retrograde vibe sort of back out into the forefront. Um, any thoughts on that
Yeah.
flow? Or
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, I think Mercury Chiron can definitely get kind of heady, but it can be a lot about your story, you know, and like the ups and downs in your story. And then that sextile to Uranus on the 7th brings some upliftment. Both planets are in the terms of Jupiter. So there's something about this like encouraging kind of spark that helps kind of like move things forward. And then on the 9th, the trine to Neptune, those are both in the terms of Saturn. So there's something about imagination, but like in a realistic way. Like you're able to sort of like take care of what you need to do and stay on task, but there's like this Neptunian flair to it in a way. So yeah, there can just be like this creative kind of edge to the tasks. So yeah, I think about that as being like very inspirational. And yeah, I think that that can be just like a very inspired, but in like a very immediately applicable way. So yeah, you can like bring creativity to your daily tasks basically. And because a lot of people think of creativity as like putting a paintbrush to a piece of paper, and that's not necessarily true. Like being creative is being able to look at something you look at every day differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it makes me wonder. I'm like, oh, this is on a Sunday. I'm like, oh, maybe I feel some pool parties or some beach parties happening with with the Mercury Neptune energy. If you're not out there, kind of feeling those creative vibes and flowing with that, you might just want to be near some water and sort of blow off steam from the week of whatever might have got into a more irksome space, right? With that Chiron component earlier in the week. And then I think you're absolutely right about the sextile to Uranus. I feel like Uranus was, when it's always a flow, it's always it has that it's almost like, I wouldn't say like a balloon deflating, but if there was like some no, that's too graphic. I was thinking about more of like a just something that's pressurized, and you just like pop it or you like release it just a little bit, and it's like, oh, I get some relief because I'm not like tied up in it anymore. It's like I can kind of switch my thinking. Right? Because keep in mind, I kind of keep having to go back to what Catherine said earlier in the program about remembering that Mercury in Cancer is this, it's a mute sign, it's an internalized quality. So a lot of this headspace, this mindset that we're talking about can be very much an internalized experience where, we're kind of going ups and downs, right? I think about Mercury in Cancer, Sun in Cancer, it all comes back to the moon. At that time, so there's different flavors, and other people might not see that going on, but we feel it inside of us.
Yeah, I mean, this could definitely be like an emotional exchange, but like as you were saying, a way that feels like a release, an outlet, like there's receptivity, there's understanding. I get the like image in my mind of this Mercury Neptune trine with the moon in Pisces is like, hey, like it's like you're connecting with a best friend who you can kind of like vent to safely, and it just, and then you feel a million times better after, or you just share space with someone who gets it. Like you don't even have to go down the list of everything. It's because it's water, it's just what's felt. So yeah, this could definitely be like a moody energy, but I think that Uranus will help move it in a way that feels supportive.
Yeah, so you don't stay stuck in it, right? That's
Yeah.
the thing. Is like sometimes we get like stuck in whatever it is we're ruminating about that might be a little bit triggersome for us, and you can't, it's not productive to stay certain places for too long, and that's where Uranus comes in and is like, shake it off. Let's move it on. Let's let it go. Let's accept things for what they are. That's a very Mercury kind of Neptune blend here. Is like just having
Yeah.
that acceptance and compassion and letting it go. Let's just go, to the beach and hang out and have some fun because that's
This
why not?
this kind of reminds me too, I need to like plug like a cautionary thing here because I'm a former hairstylist, and there's this thing called the breakup haircut. I'm sure you've all heard about it, when you're going through kind of like a tough emotional place. And then you're like, I'm just going to get the haircut and I'm going to chop it all off, because Venus is in a square to Uranus. So already people are wanting to do some sort of like impulsive changes to their hair. And I did like a whole thread about it on Twitter and copied it on my Instagram. But like, there's a whole list I have of like do's and don'ts for that. But this reminds me, because Venus is still very much in that square, of like the emotional breakup haircut. So if you're thinking of doing that, just wait until, if you still want the style after the retrograde, then do it. Is kind of my rule of thumb.
I know. I can only imagine how many people, especially with all the Leo planets, especially with Mars here, Mars getting to the last degree of Leo. It's really like pressurized at the very end. Mars kind of being the scissors, right? Wouldn't that be the
Yeah.
the cut?
Mm-hmm.
And so here that moon is, or that Mars is like, let's do it. We're feeling bold. We're feeling, and then a couple weeks go by and you're like, I'm not so crazy about that look anymore, and it takes a long time to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is good. That is good words of advice, especially as Venus is about to station, because I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of folks making impromptu appointments.
Yeah, just give yourself a little more time to think about it is all.
Yeah. Well, and especially if we because basically we on Sunday we round out our moon quarters with a last quarter moon in Aries. So we have that last quarter moon, which is always great for, getting that spur of the moment spontaneity. I'm fired up to go do this. I'm gonna change. So taking that what you said to heart even more, Catherine, when Aries is like, let's just do this. Let's not think about it too much. So we're just gonna go and get it done. Especially because think about a last quarter moon in Aries, it could have, Aries sort of has this crisis component to it. It doesn't have to be like, it can be a crisis, but sometimes crisis feels different, to different people in different moments of what that looks like. But essentially that last quarter kind of like pushing tension with the sun is backed by that 29-degree Mars in Leo, that's a pressurized position. So I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty eventful last quarter in Aries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then we got Mercury also, because Mercury wasn't done yet, right? Mercury, after it trines Neptune, it goes on to oppose Pluto
Yeah.
before it moves into Leo, and then Mars ingresses into Virgo on the 10th, on that Monday. So there's sort of this lineup, Mercury's not quite done. It touches into Neptune, but it's gonna get that yearly opposition to Pluto right when Mars is sitting in that very testy sort of degree. So that's an interesting lineup.
Yes. Ooh, because very. I think that Mercury opposite Pluto is like the ultra emo signature at the 29th degree. It's
Yeah.
like very emo. And when you have a lot of planets like that at 29 degrees, 29 degrees, there's like an urgency quality, or it can sort of describe a state of distress, or even sometimes being in like a state of some kind of emergency. And so sometimes it's how we feel on the inside, or we feel like we got to get something done, or we have to do something about something. So yeah, look out for that, because a lot of planets at 29 degrees, there can be that kind of energy in the air. But yeah, so I think there is like an urgency quality with Mercury in Cancer opposite Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, which is like the ultimate signature of late stage capitalism. And so like Mercury in Cancer is like, how do we care for ourselves? And I think on another level, Mercury opposite Pluto can be like an obsessive quality, a tunnel vision quality, something to direct a lot of focus to. So if you are able to get in the driver's seat of what that energy is offering us, it can be driven toward something that requires a great deal of focus or brain power. But again, it could be kind of emotional, just being in a Cancerian, in a water sign.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of times we have intense focus over something where we tend to be emotionally connected to it to some extent. Not everybody, you know, sometimes it's more of like an intellectual, airy flavor that we can kind of tap into that. But a lot of times when people are really focused on something, it's because there's an emotional connection that is sort of tapped in that kind of gives it that extra juice to like really hyperfixate.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is it positive? Is it moving forward? You know, your goals and your ambitions, and you know where you want to be in life, right? Because we got this kind of fire starter, you know, hot energy of that last quarter in Aries, that kind of pushes us to that place of what a new beginning might look like, or where we need to take charge, or have control over our lives, and you know, kind of do that burst and that switch, you know, or maybe where we rise up and we kind of like, you know, take the reins for something that is important to our inner well-being, or our family life, or you know, our communal space. You know, it thinks about like, I feel like you know, what came to mind is like, I feel like a lot of people are going to start some sort of like exercise regimen on this day, or like, you know, we're like, you know what, you know, I've been partying the last couple of weeks, I've had all that thing, and he's like, I need to get some movement, like I gotta get this blood flowing, and this, you know, I gotta take care of myself, you know, like, and that kind of self-starter energy to take care of yourself, and that takes focus, right, and discipline.
That fixation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a Gemini ruled year, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll get on some sort of obsessive deep dive that Sunday, probably.
I
Or
know, I'm
Monday.
still actually, I move out of the Gemini year on this day.
Oh, well,
So
happy
yeah.
solar return.
Yes, I will be moving into the moon ruled year. So I will
Oh,
have this everything I'm speaking about here, I will have in my my solar return chart.
this is Mel's solar return.
Yeah,
You're
so I'll
looking
let
at
you
it.
know. I'll let you know on the other side. Get back to me in the year. Um,
Cool.
so all right. Well, we have okay, so that, let's see here. So we have, moving on. Let's see. So, oh, those nodes are inching over, but let's talk about Mars and Virgo, because that's going to be a
Yes.
different. That's not Mars and Leo. So it's interesting just thinking about Mars inches over into Virgo, becomes Mercury ruled, and what's Mercury doing? Opposing Pluto, you know.
Yeah, and this is when like Mars, Venus, like Mars crosses the threshold and says, I'm going over here, baby.
Yeah.
Are you coming with me? And Venus is like, no.
She's like, I forgot something over here. I'm gonna have to tour back and
I'll get back to you in February.
yeah, pretty
Literally.
much.
That's when they'll meet up again.
That's funny.
But yeah, Mars and Virgo. I love Mars and Virgo. I mean, think about it this way. We had 8 long months, or maybe it was 7 long months of Mars in Gemini. And I feel like that Gemini is a mercurial sign. It tends to kind of scatter and disperse. There's a curiosity element, there's a stirring the pot element. There's a lot of just like the encouragement to look at things from a different angle. But you kind of get that mercurial energy in Virgo, but there's a little bit more focus to it.
Yeah.
So Mars in Virgo is going to feel a lot, I think, better than Mars in Gemini. And yeah, it lets you kind of like, I'm a big fan of Mars in Virgo because I think it helps you check off a lot of the little items on your to-do list. So a lot of the little things that you've kind of been putting off, it's going to be a little bit harder to focus on the big projects, but it'll help you get through a lot of the smaller ones. Because with Virgo, the devil is in the details. And so Mars gets excited about that. Mars spends a long time in those. And also, this is really great for just being able to sort of multitask when that versatile, mutable energy. So yeah, it's great for organization, one of my favorite things. And Mars in Virgo wants to, there's an improvement quality as well. So you're organizing to make something better accessible in your home, or you're reorganizing to beautify. There's a lot of different purposes to that. But Mars in Virgo wants to make sure that things run a little bit more smoothly. And so it helps declutter is kind of the thing.
Virgo loves some efficiency. It's like, how can we make this as highly as efficient as possible? Which is great, you know. Like you said, we've had an interesting tour of Mars for quite some time. Like I'm just gonna say it, the chaos of Mars and Gemini.
You could say it.
As a native, I will say it. You know, and that Mars in Cancer was an interesting placement. You know, Mars in Leo is kind of like firing us up a little bit, but Mars in Virgo is it's productive.
It's welcome.
It's well, I will take it. I will take it. I will run with it, especially once Mercury gets into Virgo in, you know, Leo season. There'll be a highly productive just spot of time that I think a lot of us have been almost even waiting for, you know. So this is sort of that, and we're going to feel that, right? Because this is the thing with Mars moving into this bits and pieces sort of sign, and this kind of transitional energy, especially on like with physical things and earthly mundane considerations. You know, it literally can get something done, like something that you can touch, feel, see, you know. It can work with that. But we're going to start to feel that pressure, because that's the one of the things is the second Mars moves into Virgo, it's going to start to head to that opposition with Saturn. And that's always sort of like a pressurized, you know, it's a halfway point between that Mars-Saturn cycle. So all these things that Mars is going to want to basically kind of do, maybe in Virgo, we're gonna start to kind of feel that brewing, because we see Saturn across the way, and even though Saturn might be a little more lenient in Pisces, we still sense its presence. So just know that will be kind of a thing there. Now there's a couple things that happen before we get to our new moon in Cancer. That's gonna be on the following Monday, the 17th. So it's actually rather. It's kind of like a chill week, that last quarter, just because the only thing we're doing is, you know, other than getting past this Mercury, Pluto opposition, it's going to basically, we're going to have the sun squaring Chiron. I don't know if that's chill, but I might retract that statement. And then that sextile to Uranus. So basically mirroring Mercury's moves earlier that we talked about. And then of course Mercury will be in Leo at this time. So that's kind of the main action the week of July 10th before we get to our new moon the following Monday. So, I mean, I guess we didn't really speak to anything about Mercury and Leo. That is definitely a switch from the mute of Cancer and the emotionality that comes there to being, you know, Leo. It's loud. It's loud. It's loud. It's out there. It's more willing to express, you know, that kind of boldness. Maybe not so much with the sun still in Cancer, but, you know, it's getting situated. So any thoughts on Mercury and Leo? Just a little quick thing.
I love Mercury and Leo, because I think that, I mean, and it's moving ahead of the sun now zodiacally. So it definitely does bring people out of their shell, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that Mercury in Leo is, and you'll notice it right away, people are talking about themselves, and I like it. I like
Guilty.
it a lot. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. I like hearing people's opinions, people's stories, where people are coming from. I don't know. It's refreshing to me. There's something lively about it. Yeah, it's something I really enjoy about that energy. But yeah, Mercury in Leo is very passionate and dynamic, lively, expressive, and willing to tell you what it thinks. And it's also very affectionate as well. Like, I think that Mercury in Leo is very generous with the compliments and making people feel seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, well, obviously I love Mercury and Leo. I got Mercury and Leo. And probably why I'm always talking about myself. I always come back to referencing it because it's like, when we think about Mercury, it's our point of perception. And as one-sided as it might sound, like that Mercury in Leo, its point of perception is the self, so it's almost like coming to an understanding about the not only yourself but the world around you and the people that are close to you through your own lens and how that relates to you. And so sometimes that can look a little bit like it's just revolving around the self, but really it's just a point, I think, of being able to relate based on personal experience. It's just because that's where that Mercury's focused. So I guess we're all kind of going to be focused there.
Yeah, well,
Which is fun.
We're coming out of that internal Cancerian
Yeah.
element, and then like all the things that we've been in process with come out, and we want to talk about it, and that's how it comes to life and makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Because Mercury's going to make those same moves, right? With Jupiter, with Uranus, everything that is going to touch down with Venus. So and Mercury's the mouthpiece. So all those
Mhm.
things that were happening with the Venus and Mars, and so those precursors that we were talking about earlier in the program, now the microphone is being passed around.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna hear it. We're gonna hear it here. So now the sun. I mean, any thoughts on kind of the sun squaring Chiron and sextiling Uranus, which we're going to see basically from the 12th to the 14th? That's sort of a lead up to our new moon that is coming. That's going to be flowing essentially with those planets, with Uranus and Neptune both too. We have an interesting new moon, so I want to get over to that pretty quickly, but just wanted to give some space if you had any insight into this kind of like balsamic phase with what the sun's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly the balsamic moon phase is when we start to go into like quiet mode in terms of activities. And there's just a little bit less energy for external, and more, it kind of goes more internal if you can give that to yourself. But yeah, the sun's sextile with Uranus, I think, could be like, I always think about it as like illumination, a spark, a little bit of like a mini boost, a mini catalyst in terms of energy, or being able to understand something too.
Yeah.
With the sun being a symbol of prophecy and Uranus being like instant, I think it's just, we things can come to light, things can kind of click into place for us. So yeah, I like that. But
Which
that'll get wrapped into the new moon.
Yeah,
So
which is always helpful, right? When you lead into a new moon, right? Because you're going into a new cycle. So if you can get that bit of insight and you get that kind of like kick and within of something kind of just coming to you, it's a right place to set seeds for what's to come. So let's jump into that new moon here, which is going to be July 17th around 11:31 a.m. here Pacific time. It's going to be a Monday, and so we have that moon or that sun moon combo at 24 degrees Cancer and 56 minutes. It's going to be, as we said before, it's sort of in between a separation from that sextile to Uranus to going on to trine Neptune. Good old Neptune's back in the fray here. And of course, we got the moon in domicile, so there is that strong lunar energy, even though it is our new moon, or so that's a solar point there. But we also have some other things going on. We got Mars getting ever close to Saturn there. We got Mercury squaring Jupiter. Talk about, and that happens like sort of right before that new moon, which is interesting. Once again, thinking about those seeds and kind of looking to the future and kind of that spark of awareness. It's a very potent new moon, it feels like to me, especially with Venus nearing the station degree. I mean, what are your thoughts on this hodgepodge of energy?
Oh goodness. Yeah, I love that the moon is in its domicile. It's we love that, especially when it's unafflicted. Unfortunately, we have this last, probably our last Cancer new moon opposite Pluto. That can definitely kind of follow in those footsteps we were saying about Mercury opposite
Mm,
Pluto, where it's definitely a little moodier. There's definitely a little bit more of an intensity to the emotional quality there, but nonetheless, it's a Cancer new moon, and you can't argue with that. There, it's going to be good for a lot of things other than that, but that Pluto will still be felt. But
yeah.
yeah, like self-care, nurturing, watering yourself, all those things that we kind of mentioned earlier too about Mercury in that trine with Neptune, that Neptunian quality of like compassion, unity, artistry, love at that 27 degrees of Pisces. Love, like this is a very nurturing new moon, and I think maybe that Plutonian element could be like a protective element too. Like I need to kind of protect myself from reading the news too much, or I need to like really just give my energy to my family because things are rough out there, or you know what I mean, like that Pluto will be felt. So whatever the Plutonian enemy is, your Cancer new moon experience is going to be like nurturing to sort of like arm yourself and kind of fill yourself with love, to kind of combat that force.
Yeah. And well, and to think about sort of like the I guess we can kind of look at it as like a combat flare, but thinking about just that Mars opposition to Saturn, right? To me that like speaks to also doing what is necessary, or to protect or have boundaries or do what's
Ooh,
important for yourself and your own care or your family, or
love that.
especially with that Mercury squaring Jupiter too, and kind of like seeing that wider picture of what is important to you in your position versus on what you're manifesting or building with that Jupiter and Taurus, and thinking about that trine to Neptune, because we got to think about the new moon that we're about to literally experience as we are recording this was a square to Neptune. So
True.
thinking about that, like the tension of that Neptune having stationed retrograde, and some of our Neptune issues that we might have been going through before, or where we were challenged with Neptune. Now there's more of just a flow and a receptiveness. That could be the compassion, it could be the empathy, it could also be the willingness to surrender or let go of something, or release or dissolve in a way that's not as tense. It's
Yeah.
might be necessary for
Yeah.
whatever that is that the rest of the planets see in the future and want to create and create a boundary around.
Yeah, I think this could also be really good for like magic, your spiritual practice,
Mm.
divination, because the moon in her domicile, the moon deals with magic as well. So yeah, I think that openness with Neptune, I think we can expect our dreams to be very vivid around this new
Mm.
moon. And this could just be a time where trust your intuition, or feed that muscle of intuition, feed that psychic muscle. So, yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you practice astrology, you might work with tarot, you might work with other forms of divination. So, this may be one of those really good new moons to do your new moon ritual. I'm the type of person who doesn't, especially because now I have little kids, I don't necessarily do a ritual for every new moon,
Hmm.
but this might be one that I
That's yeah.
feel very called to make the space for. I might
Yeah.
clean my crystals on this day.
Clean them up. Or hey, maybe you bring the family into the ritual, and it's a family ritual that you all do together, and you set your intentions for the month ahead, and then everybody's kind of connected to it, and
Oh yeah.
that could be fun depending on what your family looks like, or
Oh yeah.
other
No,
people
my
are involved.
3-year-old daughter, she loves helping with that stuff.
Oh.
I have a little Venus on my altar, and she's like, let's give Venus a bath today. And she gets so into it. She loves it. She loves tarot cards. She loves it.
That's adorable.
So
Well,
yeah.
we know she's on board. She'll be right there with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it is I like this new moon. It leads us into interesting territory, as we preface
Very.
in the beginning of this
Yes.
podcast.
Very much.
So we are here now. And
We've
so
arrived.
we have arrived at what we initially were talking about. And so just to sort of, I'm just going to lay it out there. I'm going to lay it out to the end of Cancer season, right? So we can just kind of compartmentalize everything and put it together. But essentially, we have the nodes. The nodes actually move into Aries and Libra like an hour after or not even hour. Like it's really soon after that new moon. So we basically have that happening on the 17th. And then on the 20th through the 21st, which is basically Thursday and Friday, we have the sun completing its trine to Neptune. We have, and also the getting ready to oppose Pluto, right? Because we talked about this chain. We have Mars opposing Saturn here. And, once those nodes shift, basically Pluto is at the bending of the nodes now. So that's big. That is a big thing that's happening. But of course, on top of that, we have Venus, who is stationing retrograde right before Leo season, like
Hours.
an hour,
Or
like it's like hour.
minutes.
Yeah, it is like right before it's like Venus is like, hi, I'm stationed, and the sun's like, oh, I'm in Leo. Here we go. Here we go. Let me go ahead and I'm just gonna put her station degree up. So I mean, what do you think about just the connection of all these things at once?
Oh my
Like anything,
goodness.
like
Yeah,
just
well,
pop?
I mean, thinking about that new moon chart and how we're able to kind of like piece it apart and say, well, here's the good things about this lunation and here's the challenging things about this lunation. That lunation, kind of sets a tone until the full moon. So that really is going to take us till the end there. And so we're going to be feeling that Pluto component there, especially as you said, the sun completes that opposition with Pluto on the 22nd. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's big stuff. This is big stuff. Looking at the nodes that you highlighted, Mel, it's interesting because as they switch, that stationing Venus now rules the south node, and then you have this Mars opposite Saturn ruling the north node. I loved what you said about duty and responsibility, and like with that Mars in Virgo opposite Saturn in Pisces. And I think something else about that we could say about that opposition is that there's going to be a need to be patient. There's going to be a need to slow down. Mars wants to steamroll ahead, and Saturn's like, hold on. I think that comes in good timing with Venus stationing to go retrograde, because she's also saying, hold on, let's slow things down a little bit. So yeah, that's important, I feel. But yeah, I think the North Node in Aries being ruled by sort of that like harshness of that malefic opposition. Yeah, that's.
And on the degree of the eclipse itself, because that's another thing to think about here too, is that the nodes are actually finally making it to the eclipse degree of April 19th.
That's major.
Yeah. So
that's major.
It's and just thinking about just the fact that the Sun Pluto opposition lights up that nodal energy at the same time, especially thinking about like bigger world picture structures of like, especially here in the US, the US being a Cancer itself, and thinking about the Pluto return. And one of the things that come up immediately in my mind is like here in San Diego, and I know this is a thing in many other places, but our homeless situation has gotten crazy. Like, I mean, it's OOC, out of control, and
Mm.
something like, and so I'm seeing aspects like this, especially with that Saturn and Pisces, because I feel like that Saturn and Pisces energy really taps into, the where does the authority come in to help those in need, or those that are, or less than in some way, or don't have enough, that compassionate support. But also not even just to help that situation, but to help, all the people that are, you know, busting their ass every day to pay like crazy amounts of money to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And but
Mm-hmm.
we're living in like this trash fill, like it's just a, it's bad. And so
Yeah.
makes me wonder if, so just locally, if some of that situation is going to sort of kind of come to an apex, especially with Venus retrograding. Because kind of like what you said before, Catherine, especially when Venus retrograded in Gemini, that connection of, people being more outspoken about injustices and what's, Venus retrograde in Leo, she does not want to look at no trash outside her front door, and like she's like, things need to be looking good around here. I'm paying for this, I deserve.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. And thinking about too, like how, just to kind of drive home what you and I were both seeing, is like this part of the month looks a little treacherous because Venus is stationing retrograde. She's ready to go in disharmony mode. She's ready to
Yeah.
sort of call out the mess. And yeah, and then you have this malefic standoff, Mars and Saturn in a standoff energy. Malefic planets, they are here to get work done. They're here to a lot of times there's a protection element there with the malefic planets, but a lot of times it just feels bad too, when they're in harsh energies like this. Like there can be some sort of, again, to use the word disharmony, like there's something really tense there. There's a problem that needs to be solved. And the polarity that is being highlighted here is Virgo, which wants order, which wants control, which wants to move forward with Mars. Then we have Saturn in Pisces, which is saying, maybe there's nothing to be done. Maybe we kind of have to just kind of allow things to work out on their own, or maybe we have to kind of just trust the process, or things can't happen overnight. Or yeah, there just seems to be a lot of presence of red tape around this opposition, of like we want to solve things, but we can't because there's like this confusing bylaw or whatever it might be. But yeah, it just feels like the tension is from wanting to do something and then either not knowing how or not being able to, and having to just kind of trust the
Yeah.
process. So yeah.
Yeah, and then through all that tension, people get frustrated, people get angry, people are going to be outspoken. I think that's where our Mercury ruling that Mars comes in, because Mercury over there in Leo is basically getting to the square with Uranus.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that's just adding a whole nother combustible scenario within the tension of the Mars Saturn, is the fact that, that Mercury Uranus, it's like, even if something is getting in the way, and there is that red tape, and the Sun Pluto is opposing those powers, like it's not going to be a peaceful situation. It's going people are going to, be outspoken, and willing, that it could be a catalyst for expression, and we'll just have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that it makes me think about, because with the node arriving at the eclipse degree, that's a major eclipse trigger.
Yeah.
And what was going on last eclipse season? Well, the former president got indicted. And I don't know, it just seems like that might be taking to another level around this time.
Which
Yeah,
would make
and
sense, because that Venus is basically stationing on his
his
ascendant,
ascendant. Yeah.
and Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, justice coming on through, rolling on through.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tension there for people who've supported him, you know what I mean? So we may be seeing some of the repercussions of that. But yeah, I think Mercury kind of moving from this very outspoken and very passionate square with Jupiter, to Uranus, that is like the radical, the rebel kind of energy, or like making a statement that is shocking, or information coming to light that is shocking or revealing, with Mercury being like information and news and reveals with Uranus there. So there's something shocking that kind of comes to light with that as well. And the other element of this whole thing is Eris. And I know a lot of people don't put Eris in the charts, or even
let me put her on.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically at like sitting around 25 Aries is basically where she's at these days. 24 Aries about. So she's in an exact square of that new moon at 24 Cancer. She's in an exact square of that. And again, Eris is she wants her seat at the table. She wants representation. She wants to be included. She wants there to be equality. So it's interesting that Eris stations on the same day as Venus and is also in a square with that new moon. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very rambunctious period. And whenever you see a lot of planetary shifts or a lot of planet stationing, there's big reversals and big turns of events happening in the world. So this will probably be a very eventful time in the world, and certainly in our own lives with Venus. And it's like, it doesn't matter what your Time Lord is at this stage, like every planet seems to be doing something interesting. So in your own life, yeah, it's going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody will be feeling it. Maybe if she's your Time Lord, you'll be feeling a little bit more. Maybe if you're a Taurus or a Libra rising, you'll definitely be feeling it.
Oh yeah.
That will be there. But it is a lineup. So we'll just have to sort of wait this one out and see where it takes us at this point. But you can bet that the last days of Cancer season, and the kind of that July, really at July 17th and the new moon to that full moon cycle of what Catherine was saying earlier, just kind of that 2-week period. There's a lot built into that upcoming lunar cycle. So hold space for it.
A little angsty.
A little angsty. Well, that brings me to, all right, I think we did a good treatment despite me being sick and us having like us and the balsamic hours of a new moon that's coming.
You've done great.
I think we did great. We rolled with the Neptune. So this always comes to the point of the program where I'm like, Catherine, if you had one word to describe Cancer season 2023, what would it be?
Oh goodness. It's so tough because it's so like there's just, I want to say angsty, but I also want to say magic, because I think that there's a lot of Neptune there, and the good kind of Neptune, I think.
The good kind. There is a good kind of Neptune. It's true. It's Neptune just throws us for a loop because there's varying shades of Neptune,
Yes.
But yeah. So, all right, magic. I like magic. It's the moon's month, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on. God, I'm like, do I even have a word? I'm like, what is my summary? Because it's right. There's just so many different
I can think of others.
variables.
Connection, self-expression, authentic self-expression. Yeah, there's a lot. Going with the moon, like the moon can change every day. So
The only word that came into my mind was protection, for whatever reason. It might go with your magic.
Ooh.
When you do magic, you do need a little bit of protection there.
Protection spell.
I'm thinking about like the Cancer shell. I'm thinking about that Mars, Saturn, and just Saturn being activated, but also Neptune. When Neptune's activated, like you can't be too, with water, you can't be too porous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Otherwise things just run through you, or people trample over you.
Totally.
like there might be, there's this element of kind of self-nurturing and self-care, or care for the family. It's like, oh, how do I protect myself? How do I protect others? It doesn't have to be in like a fear-mongering state. It could be in just the little things, like how do I protect myself so that, feel financially stable, or feel like I'm putting the right nutrients into my body. And, like there's many different ways we can look at protection, but I guess that's sort of my word that's coming up here.
Love it.
Oh, all right. Well, wow, that was a. I'm like, I'm gonna need to go rest. I'm like, I am feeling it. So before we go here, Catherine, where can people find you? What you got going on?
All right. So you can find me at catherineurban.com. I'm starting a course in 3 months
Ooh.
from now. So right around the fall equinox, I am starting a course on transits. So I've got that going on. And I'm also about to post up a webinar that is covering the unification of solar returns and annual perfections. So yeah, those are some new
Mm.
offerings and upcoming offerings that I have. But in the meantime, you can also connect with me at Astro Catherine on Instagram and Patreon. I also have a monthly astrological meetup. So like once a month I hold court. No, like have an event, and everyone's welcome to drop in and do that with me. It's called Cauldron. So we are there to concoct astrological mischief and magic. So yeah, if you want to come, I have like a roster of the events for the year that's on my website as well.
Oh, I love it. And I will give a shout out for Catherine for since Cancer season. Weren't you were doing a little series on your YouTube not too long ago about family dynamics and astrology,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have that going on too. It's a little series called The Family Astrologer, and I'm talking about family dynamics, and it's plugging along. I don't have like a rigorous schedule with it. It's very lunar. It's very like
Yeah.
if I'm
If you
feeling
feel inspired,
inspired,
yeah.
yeah, or if I'm able to like scheduling with guests is hard. I'm learning how to do that. I'm starting to branch out and bring on guests. So that's hard especially when your schedule's already limited. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I've got that going on, and that's so fun, and I love that topic. So
Yeah, so definitely go check that out because she's got some good videos up there that speak to, I mean, family dynamics, but also when we think about family and astrology, because the people that we are in family with, it's not random.
it's not.
It's not random.
Familial astrology proves that, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Yeah.
it's fascinating stuff. So definitely go check that out. So, all right. Well, where can you find me? You can find me over at energeticprinciples.com. And of course, I will share a blog post with Catherine's information over there. So you can find both of us there. I will be back actually here in a couple weeks with a podcast. Gray Crawford will be joining me again to do sort of a little summary on the half point of the year. But we will also be doing an episode solely dedicated to Venus retrograde. So if you want to know more about just Venus retrogrades in general and this one coming up, we'll be doing a more in-depth treatment of that before she hits that station point. And you can also find me sometimes on social media in Energetic Principles. And also, if you're not watching this on YouTube, or even if you are, I'm trying to build my subscribers to 1,000 subscribers so that I have some ideas to do a few kind of live opportunities coming up. And the beauty of doing the live is that if you have a certain amount of followers, you get different perks from YouTube. And so I'm getting there. So if you can come give me a subscribe just to help a girl out, that would be greatly appreciated. And you can find that link, I think, well, through my website. I should probably put it on where the description here too. But yeah, help a girl out. Give me a subscribe. I think that is all that I got. Oh, and I will say I have my monthly newsletter, The Heavenly Wind, that goes out at the beginning of each month. So if you want to sign up for that, you can do so for free on my mailing list, which is at the bottom of energeticprinciples.com. So, all right. Well, if you liked what you heard here today, leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast, especially Apple Podcasts, because that's the one that counts. It helps get seen a little further here for both myself and all the guests that join me. Spread the good news, share with a friend. There's a lot to say about Cancer season, so let other people know what's going on so that they're prepared in those final days. So they're like, what is going on in the world? This helps you prepare. So, all right. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for joining me again. It's always a pleasure to host you on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mel. It's been a pleasure to join you and to be in conversation with you. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in to us talking all about Cancer season 2023. We wish you the best of luck out there. Get into your magic, keep your protection. We'll see you on the other side. And as always, may the stars be with you.